And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Wow, the big presidential debate number one. Ratings down. This has got to be a sore spot for Donald Trump. Ratings down a little bit. The first numbers that came out showed down somewhere in the range of 36% decline in the number of viewers from the previous debate in 2016. And look, Nielsen still said there were 73 million people who watched it, and most people stayed, which I found interesting. But 73 million, down from the 2016. And interestingly enough, one of the big porn sites said that during the debate, their numbers actually skyrocketed. In fact, a state like Arizona saw over a 700% increase in the number of people going to their porn site. Pennsylvania saw something like over 200% increase in the numbers there. And it just made you go, people were turning it off. Because it really was, from the start, it was what it was going to be. You saw the Biden camp walk in, they had their masks on. You saw the Trump people, nope, not wearing a mask. Melania had one, and good for her. But the rest of the Klan, no masks. And that's a statement. That's, again, another one of those things dividing the country. And what the debate really was about was continuing that debate, that divide. In fact, so much so, and it was so bad as it was supposed to be, that the Commission on Presidential Debates announced that they were going to, how'd they say it? They said last night's debate made clear that additional structure should be added to the format of the remaining debates to ensure a more orderly discussion of the issues. That's generally a nice way of parents saying, my kids are horrible brats and I can't control them, so we've got to find a more orderly way to discuss the issues. And the thing is you had one horrible brat. This is all about Donald Trump. But the commission went on to say they're going to carefully consider a number of additional tools to maintain order. And I said during the debate, maybe shock collars. Maybe don't put the shock collar on the dog, put it on Trump. So every time he barks out, give him a little volt, put him back in the line. Just a thought. Now, CBS News is saying that they're considering giving the moderator the ability to cut their mics. And I'm going, that should have been their first and foremost, without question, should have been right there all along. Now, not surprising, the Trump campaign came out and kicked and screamed and whined and basically said it's because Trump did so well that the Commission on Debates is, they're siding with Joe. They're doing the underdog thing again. Everyone's against us. The world's out for us. And look, it's not surprising. It's not surprising that this is the take that they go after. Now, what's interesting, and this is one of those moments where it was easy to see what was coming. This debate, no surprises. You knew this was going to be a total giant S show. You knew that's what it was going to be. It was going to be, how did they put it? A dumpster fire inside a train wreck, going over a cliff into a fiery pit of lava with no bottom. Basically how they knew this was going to be. And it was exactly all what it was and what we all expected it to be. And it was Trump's plan from the beginning. I remember a couple of weeks ago, they were coming out and they were saying, well, Donald Trump's not preparing for the debates. He's a skilled debater, all that stuff. And then he started lowering the bar. Joe Biden is so good. And he's on these super enhancing mental drugs, which evidently there's a drug out there I didn't know about that helps with dementia. It makes you really sharp. And if there is, maybe we could get that to the seniors who really are suffering from dementia. Maybe we could really help people, but that's not something Donald Trump wants to do. And this was the dumpster fire that he wanted. Trump got exactly what Trump wanted. He wanted to be the bully. He wanted to tear the house down. He wanted to hurl insults and lots of projection. And he did that. And he did it effectively. His base sucked it up. He's the bully that they want him to be. No question. And in fact, Trump clearly, from his perspective, won this debate. And he said immediately, I won, because he wins everything, right? Everything he does is the most tremendous, best ever. No one can believe how well he does. But this is exactly what he set out to do. He set out to do attacks on Biden's son. He set out to do what all right-wing talk radio hosts do, and that's never allow someone to complete a thought. And once they start into a thought, interrupt them and then direct them in another way so they never get back to that thought. And he did it masterfully. I really believe that he did exactly what his game plan was to disrupt the whole thing and to really make people, frustrated and angry. Because can anybody name me a policy that they actually discussed? Can you walk away from that going, wow, there's a little policy discussion there that maybe on this policy that's going to make our lives a little bit better, this guy's going to be better than that guy? No, because the truth of the matter is Trump doesn't have any policies. His policies are about kleptocracy. His policies are about making the rich richer and the rest of us poorer. That's the reality, all while telling us how wonderful he's doing and how wonderful off we're doing, so that we then feel guilty for not doing so well, and then we don't do anything. Now, right out of the gate, you knew this was coming, and I'm so ticked off about this. The liberals, the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi came out and said, no more debates. Joe Biden shouldn't debate anymore, shouldn't do this anymore. Don't do it, because he's going to do this. And Biden responded, and I thought his response was, he had to. He came out and said, no, I am, as long as the commission continues down the street, narrow as they have, I'll debate him. He says, I know I'll certainly try. He wanted a fact checker. He goes on with all of this stuff. And I'm going, yeah, okay, good. You're gonna try. Yeah, all right. Good old college try. If it's me and I'm advising him, I respond with, what are you talking about? Are you kidding me? There is no question I'm going to debate that bully wherever, here on a stage, in the alley and back, in the phone booth around the corner. I am going to take him on. I'm going to call him on his BS. I'm going to call out every lie, and I'm going to shove it right back in his face. That's what working class liberals want. That's what working class Democrats want. That's what working people want. They want somebody who's going to say, no, heck with that. We're going to take on the bully. Because our ideas are better, our ideas are right. We have the way to help average, everyday working people get ahead. Because look, they're getting screwed right now. Trump benefited from the Obama policies, even though, he loves to internalize, it's all about him. He did it all by himself. And yet, even Chris Wallace said, job growth during the last 3 years of the Obama administration was still better than yours. Even Chris freaking Wallace. Now, look, I do sympathize with Wallace a little bit. I do. He's taken a beating. I don't know how you control a child like that in that environment, who believes that there is no one to restrain him, no rules apply to him, no laws are effective for him. There's nothing for him. And he knows his base sucks up the fact that he's a rule breaker. He doesn't follow the rules. So for them, they saw an absolute victory. For people on the left, for Democrats, for people like me, I saw Joe Biden as doing a really good job of being presidential. In fact, when he looked right into the camera and he spoke to the American people, I thought that was a powerful moment. And he did what, finally what I said he should do, and just shut up, quit yapping. I mean, there should have been more of that. What is wrong with you? And it's one of these moments where the rest of the world is watching. And if you look at some of the social media posts, they're watching with horror. Because this is what our country has devolved into. If we have the kind of instability that was projected last in that debate, what does that mean for the rest of the world when we're the stabilizer of the rest of the world? What does that mean for everyone? So the next two debates are going to be very interesting. I think Biden should do much more of the same. I would like to have had him be more focused on hey, let him yap on, let him go. I'm talking to you. This is about you. And he did say that. This isn't about Donald Trump. This isn't about our families. This is about your family. This is about the American people. And I thought he did that very effectively. One of the better lines that he had in the entire debate. I thought there were some good little quips that Biden had. The one about not knowing, where the suburbs were and wouldn't know how to get to one unless he took a wrong turn. Thought that was funny. He did hit him with the Putin's puppy thing, which, got to be honest, kind of true. He did hit him with, it is what it is because you are who you are. And I thought that was, to me, one of the most powerful moments, because the virus that has gripped our nation and is getting worse and, from all indications, going to get considerably worse. It got me to thinking that, the reality is we've had a failure. This president has been an absolute failure. And, there was a really great Vote Vets ad with Sully Sullenberger. You may remember him from the Miracle on the Hudson, the pilot who landed the plane. And, he said, look, that one moment has defined his life. But it was all of those thousands of hours in the cockpit, all of those, thousands of hours of regular flights over, all different terrains that prepared him for that moment. And he went into, he said, look, leadership isn't something you just get. It's something you learn. It's something you work towards. It's something that you've prepared your life for. And you look at the moment with this virus, the reality is he chose the political over us. We now know that Donald Trump knew how dangerous this was. We now know he decided pointedly to play this down simply because it was all about his beloved Wall Street and beloved stock market. Because to him, that's all that matters. Wall Street is all that matters to Donald Trump. He doesn't care about Main Street. And that's completely clear in the discussion they had about healthcare. He talks about, I've got this great plan for healthcare and we've lowered insulin. How did it go? We've lowered insulin prices down to they're almost like water. I don't know what the hell that means, but I know insulin prices are not the same price as water. That is not hard to fact check. But yet I had someone actually regurgitate that to me, which made me just stop and go, did you hear what came out of your mouth? And that's the mastery of what Trump's been able to do. He lies so often. Virtually every word out of his mouth is a fabrication. And you don't have instant fact checking. So what you end up getting is a lot of the minions going, well, Donald said it, it must be true. Because insulin is as cheap as water. We've brought drug prices down 80, 90%. And you go, but what about those people who are buying the drugs who are still going broke and are benefiting from the Affordable Care Act who closed the donut hole? What about those seniors? What about all the people who have health care because of Joe Biden and Barack Obama and the Democrats through the Affordable Care Act? May not be perfect, but they've got something. You're going to rip this away, and all you've given them is a worthless executive order that we're going to cover pre-existing conditions. Yeah, really? The law of the land already does that. And yet you're in the Supreme Court doing everything that you can possibly do to turn that away. To me, this is one of those moments where the part of me that hopes these debates turn productive, because yesterday the debate wasn't productive. It was what it was supposed to be, what Trump was going to make it. And Biden had to show up and stand up to the bully. As anyone knows, if you've ever been on a school playground, you've got to stand up to the bully. You cannot let the bully run you over. And I think Biden did that during the debate. I think he stood up well. And I think he's got to stand up for the next ones and be a little more forceful. But for me, it's not forceful towards Trump. You can't take on the bully in that fashion. I liked the way he looked at the camera and he said, you know what? It's about your family. I wanted to hear him talk about, how are we going to make sure that every American family has health care so that they don't have to go to sleep at night worrying that, what happens if we get sick? What happens if the kids fall off their bike and break an arm or a leg? What happens if we can't afford our prescription drugs? Do we lose our homes? Do we go bankrupt? This is a moment, in this moment of pandemic, where Biden, I want to look into the camera and said, you know what? We're going to be there with you. We're going to be your partner. We're going to be beside you every step of the way. We're going to beat this virus. We're going to get the vaccine, and we're going to do it as fast as we safely can. Unlike Trump, who's saying, oh, we're going to have it out in a couple of weeks, be out in no time at all. And yet you've got the CEO of one of the main companies developing this drug saying, no, we're probably not going to be rolling it out until spring at the earliest. But you got Trump who keeps wanting to believe this stuff and keep pushing it out at us. So for me, it's about telling the truth. And I think Biden did that. And I think he did it really well. Because all the fact checking today has been around the idiotic statements that Trump came up with. We guaranteed pre-existing conditions. No, you didn't. You signed an executive order that has no weight. He says, I paid millions of dollars in taxes. Yet what we see from the returns that we've seen, that's not even remotely close to the truth. If you want to change that, if you really wanted to change that and you wanted to prove, you could release your returns as every presidential candidate has done in my entire lifetime. There's a lot we could be doing. I claim that Joe Biden said that it was xenophobic to close the borders with China. Biden never said that. But again, it's the big lie. You say it over and over and over and again enough, people start to believe it. And it's what we've got. It's the world that we're in right now. Because he has, and to his credit, I mean, he's a master at this, at social media. He's a master at changing the news cycle, and he's a master at causing chaos. And that's what the debate was. It was total chaos. But not because of Joe Biden. Joe Biden went there and did what he was supposed to do. He talked to the American people. He attempted to get out his vision, yet the moderator and Trump was never going to let that happen. And like I said, I in a small way feel sorry for Chris Wallace because there was no stopping the tirade and the tantrum. Trump came out, and you saw it in his eye. Whatever drug they gave him or whatever they put in him made him the angry Trump. And that's the giant S show that we got. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. That was the day oil workers walked off the job. The strike soon spread to 20 states and involved more than 43,000 workers at 22 oil companies. After years of wartime wage freezes, the union's demand was 52 for 40, 52 hours pay for 40 hours work. Workers demanded a 30% pay increase, shift differentials, and an eventual return to the 36-hour work week. The strike began in Michigan at the Saccone Vacuum Refinery in Trenton. From there, it spread to Gulf, Sinclair, and Shell. By October 4th, President Truman signed Executive Order 9639, allowing the Secretary of the Navy to seize petroleum operations. The Oil Workers International Union CIO immediately called off the strike and ordered its members back to work. A month later, the Navy had still not relinquished control of operations. The Union considered Truman's seizure a betrayal. There was no mechanism put in place to settle the dispute or consider workers' demands. By January 1946, the oil panel created by the Secretary of Labor finally awarded oil workers an 18% wage increase. Though disappointed, the Union considered it a victory. They asserted the strike action was significant on a number of levels. The first nationwide industry strike had just forced the oil companies to meet with the union for the very first time. The OWI believed the groundwork for industry-wide bargaining had been finally established. It had been the first post-war strike and had forced the government to begin moving away from wartime wage controls. Of the post-war strikes, it won the largest pay increase. And importantly, it broke the power of Standard Oil to dictate wages to the industry through its dealings with its independent union.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So nationwide, it's reported that some 23 million people, as of August, could be thrown out of their homes, kicked to the curb, evicted, foreclosed on because of this pandemic. And this week, you find that the governor of Florida has decided that on October 1st, they're going to end the foreclosure and the eviction moratorium in Florida, which should see I would guess, a lot of seniors and a lot of working people finding their ways to local bridges. And, this is just, one of these moments where you go, exactly whose side are they on? And none of this came up in the giant show that was the debate. But what did come out? Donald Trump saved Big Ten football. Oh, boy. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the I don't want to call it a debate. Let's call it a temper tantrum. Here to share some thoughts on the big temper tantrum, I've asked Max Burns to come talk with us. Max is a Democratic strategist, also a columnist over at the Daily Beast. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start from the beginning. Initial thoughts on the temper tantrum?
I'll tell you, it's still processing for me what we actually saw. I mean, it was disgraceful by any measure what the president did. His plan clearly to make it so disgusting, so combative that people just won't watch. Because when people pay attention to Donald Trump, they don't like him. The problem is it was a pretty dumb plan on his part because, as the ratings have shown, more people started watching the debate toward the end than at the beginning. They were drawn in to see the president having a meltdown on national television. So if the goal was to make it so nobody watched, it's yet another failed Trump scheme.
Yeah, either that or they were finished after the massive increase in traffic to the porn websites. I don't know if you saw that, but all across the country, especially the battleground states, people were tuning into the porn and away from the dumpster fire, train wreck, fiery dive into the molten lava pit that we saw during the debate.
The porn honestly probably has more of a plot than the debate did. It seemed to just be Donald Trump having a conversation with himself. Half the things he said came right off his Twitter feed from earlier in the day. And it's notable to me, I think, that at no point in that debate did Donald Trump look at the camera and talk to the American people once. Not once did the fact that he represents 350 million people occur to him. And that, I think, is so emblematic of all this administration is.
No, that is an excellent point. For Trump, he walked into that. He wanted to destroy and humiliate and insult Joe Biden. It was all about taking out Joe Biden. It wasn't about you or me or the American people. You're spot on. And he didn't have any policy, because I'm still trying to think of, what policy is he touting? What thing is he saying? Hey, American people, you vote for me. This is how I'm going to make your life better.
Oh, no. All we heard last night was how Donald Trump is a victim, how the Democrats are being mean to Donald Trump, how the media is being mean to Donald Trump, and no one appreciates him enough. And at a time when there are almost 30 million people out of work, and people are wondering if they're going to be able to stay in their homes, I think the last concern American families have is if Donald Trump's feelings are hurt.
Yeah, good point. Now, I look at this story coming out of Florida with the governor of Florida lifting the moratorium on October 1st. And, I assume you're going to see a wave of foreclosures and people being evicted. This to me is one of those moments where, if you're really presidential, and this should have come up in the debate without question, in my view, how does Biden cut through this? Because, Trump, used the very right-wing talk radio tactics of not letting him finish a sentence, not letting him complete a thought. And when he was on a thought, directing him in a different way. How does Biden cut through this in the second debate? Because these are important issues, especially October 15th. There should be people getting kicked to the curb.
Absolutely. And Joe Biden needs to make that case. I know Kamala Harris is headed to Florida as well, where there's an almost 13% unemployment rate there. And Disney just laid off 28,000 employees in Florida across its park. And this is something that's serious to people. And Donald Trump has clearly no plan to deal with that. What Joe Biden needs to do to get around that is just talk to people directly. If Donald Trump is going to deny the American people a serious debate, Joe Biden should speak over the internet directly to Americans without the distraction.
Yeah, I thought Biden did as well as I think he could have done My advice before the debate was, at some point you just got to turn to him, and he did the you keep yapping thing, but at some point just keep rambling. Yeah, I mean you're just digging the hole. Here's the shovel. Keep going. I think you have to do that, but also while he's chirping with the moderator, I think Biden should have taken more opportunity to firmly talk into the camera and firmly stay on his thought process.
Yeah, those were without a doubt Biden's strongest moments. I thought one of the big missed opportunities for Biden was when Donald Trump said he was being sarcastic about injecting bleach into your veins. And were I Joe Biden's debate prep coach, I would have said that there's a time and a place for sarcasm. The White House podium in the middle of a public health crisis is not that. If you want to do stand up, go to a club.
Right.
This is the president we're talking about.
No, and there's no question that he wasn't joking, because we find out later after the fact that he had an uncle who was actually working on, injecting things into people's veins to try and light and all kinds of stuff. This is stuff that, it's family lore. So this is not something that just, I just made it up. It was a joke. This is something he probably believes to his core.
Absolutely. And it's tough even to tell what Donald Trump believes. We can tell he was struggling all through the debate especially during the COVID section, to contextualize the fact that 204,000 people are dead. And Donald Trump simply does not seem to understand from his responses that that's not just a number. Those are actual people who have left actual families. And that is just a staggering lack of compassion that, as every poll shows, voters are just hammering the president on how he's handled COVID.
So, in looking at the debate, I've said I don't know how many people it moved. I think the Trump cultists, they saw the debate as that's our guy doing what we want our guy to do. I think people on the left and Democrats saw Joe Biden, doing what he had to do and coming out and being, presidential and old school norms, if you will. How many people do you think this moved? Are there many people movable left? Curious your thoughts.
There's still apparently undecided voters. There were a few at the CNN focus group, which I personally could not believe that anyone could be undecided at this point. But I personally, having looked at the numbers, I tend to think there are fewer persuadables in the middle than most of these polls seem to think. Most people have probably made up their mind. What Joe Biden did well here is take and put to rest this crazy theory that he's got dementia, that he doesn't remember his own name. People tuning in to make sure Joe Biden was all right saw someone who's ready to be president. The same can't be said for the actual president.
Yeah, I got a kick out of James Woods, the actor, who immediately after debate, put out a little video of a crease in Biden's shirt to go, there's the wire, and we've got the wire. And I think if I were Biden, I would have had wires hanging out of my pocket. But that's just me.
I mean, what good would a wire do? He could barely speak a full sentence before Donald Trump interrupted him. I don't know how you would coach around that kind of insanity.
No, you're absolutely right. So in your opinion, if you're looking at this from, just from an outsider's view from like 20,000 feet, who pulled off their plan better? I got to tell you, I think my opinion is Trump pulled off his plan a little bit better, because he disrupted the entire process, and all we're talking about is what a giant S show it was. But I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I think Trump fired his base up. They wanted to see a wrestling match. They just wanted to see everything short of Trump ripping his shirt off and choke slamming Joe Biden onto the stage. But for the rest of America, beyond that 37%, they saw a president who didn't even seem to be familiar with a lot of the issues facing the country, who was talking about how messy our forests are at a time when people are talking about what we can do to put forward a systemic plan for climate change. I just don't think for regular voters, and certainly not for Republicans who are maybe having doubts, that this really portrayed Trump as the kind of guy you want to put a bet on.
Yeah, no, and this is what I struggle with. As much as I didn't like George W. Bush and I was not fond of Mitt Romney, they came with their ideas. They came with their policy moves, and you could have the discussion over that. This is cults. This is cult of personality territory. This is vote for me because I'm wonderful and nobody's better than me, and I do wonderful things and nobody can believe it, and whatever other ticks he throws out. It's not about how you're going to make people's lives better, and I'm hoping, and this is where I keep coming back to the hope, the American people see that. that when we go to the polls on November 3rd, or you cast your ballot early via the mail, and hopefully here in Pennsylvania where I live, you put it inside the secret envelope before you put it in the envelope so it actually counts. But I'm hoping that people see that, and we don't have 4 more years of this kind of chaos.
And the polls, at least for what they're worth, seem to indicate that's true, that this cult of personality has a hard limit, and that beyond that, it really turns voters off. We've seen that as the reason why the president has tried so hard to distract from COVID, to distract from the economy. It's because when we talk about the actual issues, voters can't stand what they hear. The only thing left is distraction. And I just don't think for a lot of Republicans or Labor Democrats who maybe gave Trump a chance 4 years ago, that this is what they expected to be representing them.
I wanted to get your thoughts. Nancy Pelosi came out and said that maybe there shouldn't be any more debates. I'm curious, and I've had a number of people say there should be no more debates. I wholeheartedly disagree, but I wanted to get your thoughts.
I hope there are more debates. The next presidential debate is a town hall debate. And one of the most awkward sights in all of American politics is Donald Trump failing to understand what kind of emotional response to give a regular person who needs some compassion. We saw that in his own town hall earlier in September, where he seemed completely baffled at how to respond to someone who had lost their mother and didn't have health care. That's something that Joe Biden is going to win in a walk. But honestly, I would be surprised if Trump has anyone intelligent on his team. They should not let him walk into another one of these.
Yeah. So do you think it's, the pushes to try and get Biden to go away so they don't have to have another one? Because I said from the beginning, if Nancy Pelosi would have told me there should be no debates, I'm like, no. Are you kidding me? I'm going to debate him here on a stage, out back in the alley, in a phone booth around the corner. I don't care. We're going to go at it because I'm going to defend not just my candidacy, but this country. I think, I want to see that kind of response. I want to see that kind of, maybe it's just, the working class anger that I do have, but I want to see someone who's going to really get out there and want to fight for me.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see that especially in the vice presidential debate with Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. I think that's going to be one that maybe decides more of this election than any of the presidential debates, because a lot of voters honestly are looking at who is going to potentially replace either of these men in this situation. And when they see the difference between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris, I think that's going to be clear for people.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that as well, because I guess my first question is mother going to be in the room?
I wonder if he'll be able to sit near to her.
That's a cheap shot. That's not fair. But I know Mike Pence has been preparing. They brought in former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, and they're doing some prep. Unlike what Donald did. Donald Trump did no prep for this.
Yeah, no, he spent a lot of time on Twitter, though. You can tell by the talking points.
Now, do you think having Scott Walker come in and help is going to help him with Kamala Harris? Because I think the bar right now is so high for Harris, and the bar so low for Pence that if he doesn't trip and fall walking onto the stage, Republicans are going to say he wins.
I mean, I'm honestly not sure if having Scott Walker on your team has helped any campaign in history, but certainly Mike Pence is going to be much more disciplined. He's going to at least have believable, fantastical stories about COVID. He's going to have numbers that sound convincing. So we need to not just wait for him to implode. Kamala Harris needs to come ready to press him on the failures of this administration. And I think that that's what they're really focusing on.
Now, the president, the vice president, and Harris, I believe, are engaging on a train tour across Ohio into Pennsylvania. I got to tell you, I love the old school feel of that.
This is great. It reminds me a lot of then candidate Bill Clinton's boat tour up the Mississippi River in 1992. And if you look at the political maps for that election, all those little towns along those rivers he visited went Democratic in very Republican states. And I think you get the same kind of thing by just visiting these forgotten communities who haven't probably had a presidential candidate come visit them since Wendell Willkie in the 40s. I mean, this will be an event people get excited about and talk about forever.
Yeah, this is one of the knocks that came against the Clinton campaign. She didn't do this kind of stuff. She didn't go into the small towns, and as where Trump did. I mean, one of the things you can say about Trump is the guy works. I mean, he's out there all the time. Now, in this environment, probably making things worse for our virus problems, but he's out there.
Yeah, he's out there even when his experts tell him not to be. But you're absolutely right. And the only way you fight that is by getting out there and having a better message.
Yeah, no. Last thing I wanted to get to, they talked about the virus. I got a kick out of Trump saying, well, I closed down the borders, and yet we find out that his CDC wanted to not allow cruise ships to sail, and that I guess they've overruled that. So we're now going to make cruise lines happy again, and people, getting sick on cruise ships again.
And now would be a great time to cross-check how many cruise ship company executives are members of Mar-a-Lago, because I guarantee you that played a major role. But we should trust the medical professionals. A great measure of who you can trust in this administration is whoever Donald Trump's kicking out the door. I trust them more than I trust any official statement from the Trump-Pence COVID committee or whatever he's calling it this week.
No, it's an excellent point. He said during the debate that we're going to have the vaccine within weeks.
Yep.
Do you believe that?
I wish anyone agreed with him. His own CDC director, Robert Redfield, testified under oath before Congress last week that even if we have a vaccine ready by election day, it's going to be until summer of 2021 before most people will be able to get doses. And people tend to tell the truth when you're threatening them with jail if they lie. Donald Trump should take an oath and see how honest he is about this vaccine.
No, that's an excellent point. And, you saw his former campaign manager have a little mental, whatever that was. Maybe he abused his wife. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was threatening to kill himself. Maybe he wasn't. I don't know. He's stepping away from the campaign, but it seems like a lot of people around this campaign are either having legal or mental health problems. And there's been a bunch of them.
There's definitely a toll that comes with justifying this kind of behavior. Most people are not equipped to tolerate this kind of amorality and menace for years at a time and to make excuses for it. That's really a sick person that can do that for that long and not have something happen to them. So in a way, I suppose they pay the cost for the things that they've helped to enable.
It's a good point. Hopefully folks will come out on November 3rd and vote. Hopefully they will do the mail-in ballot, and hopefully they'll do it correctly. And hopefully our courts don't throw most of them out.
Here's to hoping.
There you go. Max, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
Thank you.
Max Booth, Democratic strategist, also a columnist over at the Daily Beast. Make sure you check out his work over at the Daily Beast. We'll get links out on how you can do that. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people on the talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day that began the Elaine Massacre. The massacre took place in Arkansas, where more than 100 black farmers and sharecroppers were gunned down for daring to organize their labor. The year before, a black farmer by the name of Robert L. Hill had founded the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. Union members pooled their money to purchase land. They also hired a lawyer to sue planters who did not give black tenant cotton farmers their fair share of the profits. The group grew in membership in the Arkansas Delta region, including near the town of Elaine in Phillips County. But white landowners would not allow this challenge to their power. Armed white militias came to a church where the union was holding a meeting. The black attendees were also armed. Gunfire broke out. In response, white posses and federal troops unleashed a wave of terror across Phillips County. Hundreds of black residents were arrested. At least 100 black Arkansans were killed. Some estimates of those murdered is considerably higher. 5 white people also died. 122 black men and women were charged with murder. 12 were given the death sentence. No white vigilante, however, was ever charged. The convicted African Americans appealed their cases. One appeal for 6 of the defendants went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where it was overturned in a landmark ruling. The year of 1919 was one of the deadliest years of violence against African Americans in U.S. history. Civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson called those bloody months the Red Summer. 26 race riots left thousands of African Americans homeless and hundreds dead from Chicago to Washington, D.C. to Omaha.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, we've been having some fun with the tax returns that Trump evidently didn't want us to see, that someone put out. And we find out what we already knew. For 10 of the 15 years, he didn't pay anything. There were 2 years he paid like $750 a year. But some of the fun is when you get into what the deductions were and some of the income that he got, the $70,000 for that thing on top of his head, $750,000 in consulting fees for the daughter who was doing the job anyway on the payroll, all kinds of weird stuff. But one of my favorites is the New York Times reported that in 2017, the Billy Graham Evangelical Association paid almost $400,000 to the Trump Hotel in Washington. And it got me thinking, do you think all of those people who give their, $5, or all those people who watch it on TV who think they're changing the world and proselytizing the third world countries really thought that we were giving money to Donald Trump? Just kind of, so that Franklin Graham can go around and wine and dine pool boys? Just kind of a thought. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big debate and also some of the tax stuff that's banging around. I've asked our good friend Michael Linden to come talk with us. Michael's the executive director of the Groundwork Collaborative. Groundworkcollaborative.org is their website. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, I'm looking, let's start with the debate first, then we'll get into the tax stuff. Initial thoughts on what occurred during the big debate?
I mean, I don't know that I could say anything that hasn't already been said. It was, shocking is the wrong word, because it wasn't surprising. The president is such a disaster of a person that it was expected, but you still couldn't really believe it. If you're watching it. So I don't know that I have anything super original about the sort of big picture thoughts here. I did think there were some moments in there that I really wish that we'd had a more normal debate, because I would have wanted to hear Vice President Biden really take it to the president on a couple of very important things. But, I don't know how you do that with a guy who just makes stuff up and interrupts and doesn't seem to care at all about communicating a message to anybody.
Right. No, what you said is exactly the reason that Trump came in with his plan, and he executed his plan masterfully to disrupt the whole thing, scorched earth, chaos, so that he didn't have to answer those questions, that we wouldn't see behind the curtain on just how policy light he is and how bad he is from a policy perspective for the rest of us, and also how wonderful he is for the wealthiest people in this country in the most unequal time in our country's history.
That's really right. I was it was interesting after the debate. I thought back and I tried to think of a single time during the debate where the president bragged about a piece of legislation that he signed. He's been president for 4 years. He had unified control of Congress for 2 and the Senate for all 4. And I thought, surely there must have been one piece of legislation that he could point to and say, this is something I did for the American people. And he didn't mention a single one. He bragged about judges. He definitely bragged about judges, but he didn't even mention his signature tax cut for corporations and rich people. Now, I think that's probably because he knows that that's not a particularly popular piece of legislation, but it was kind of amazing that usually a president says, hey, look what I've done for you. Here's what I'm going to do next time. None of that.
Yeah, all we got was, tax cuts and deregulation.
Yeah, that's right.
To be honest,
not much to brag about. He did make a few things up. For example, I was surprised. I mean, surprised, again, the wrong word, but I noticed when he said, for example, Ohio, which is where the debate was taking place, he said that had the best year of job creation last year, which is utterly false. Ohio added only 4,000 jobs over the course of the entire year of 2019. That's before the pandemic, which is about 1/10 of what it added in 2016, the last year of President Obama's administration. So he just made that up. I mean, out of nowhere. Now, that was not the most important thing that people focused on over the last night, but it stuck out to me.
No, me too. And to that vein, in talking about automobile production, he was standing not more than 45 minutes from Lordstown.
Right.
That the Lordstown plant, a giant facility that made the Chevy Cruze, they shut down. And that was supposed to be the plant that he was going to make boom again. They were going to make that whole northeastern part of the state giant, and it was going to be back to manufacturing. We're bringing mining back. We're bringing steel back. We're doing all this, and it, as you've pointed out, it hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened. We are down manufacturing jobs across the country. Now we're down all jobs across the country. Let's just be honest, right? We're down about 11 million jobs since the peak before COVID. And President Trump is going to be the first president in I think in modern history to preside over a net loss of jobs in a single term, and that's kind of remarkable. But even if you look at 2019, even if you don't look at 2020. Manufacturing jobs in this country were up a little bit by about 1%, which is less, by the way, than they were up under Obama, but 1%. But in Michigan and in Ohio and in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin, they were down. So while the rest of the country was maybe getting a little bit back, the Midwest, not at all. So all those promises that he was going to focus on manufacturing, he was going to bring those jobs back, good middle class jobs that provide a life for people, didn't happen. Just didn't happen.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that the sad reality is, he didn't come prepared because he didn't prepare, and we know he didn't prepare because they told us he's not preparing, and he didn't have as you've said any facts, so he just threw out the platitudes of we're going to make America great again. Just believe me, I can do it. And yet we find out now, as this most recent report. I believe it was by the Washington Post, that the recovery that we're going through, and we can argue whether this is the giant V that he wants it to believe, or if it's more of a K, as Biden is saying. They're saying that this is going to be the most unequal recovery ever. That the rich people are, I don't know that the rich people actually lost anything. I think they did really well. It's the rest of us who took the hit, and that on the other side, inequality is going to be so much more worse. Yeah. He didn't come with any response to that.
Not at all. And the thing to understand, and that we have to remember when we go forward here, is that we were an extremely unequal country going into this recession and into this crisis, made worse by some of his policies, right? Tax cuts for the wealthy, deregulation for big business, nothing for middle and low income people except cuts and less and more rules. And we came from that into this crisis where, as you pointed out, the rich people basically did fine. And actually, many of them have done great, have really done very well. And we are still just down millions of jobs. They tend to be lower wage jobs, people who are really struggling. And what does Trump do? He blocks the extension of the $600 UI boost, which was a lifeline for millions of people. And instead he says, I'll give you a fake payroll tax cut, which pretty sure nobody's getting. I mean, I'd be very interested to hear if anybody has actually seen a tax cut out of that. It's nothing. It's going to be a very big problem that hopefully President Biden will have to fix. Yeah. I mean, it's a big problem. And
not only is that payroll tax nothing, if you did get a little bit out of it, you're going to have to pay it back.
Yeah, it's not even a tax cut. It's a deferral. And of course, if you lost your job, it doesn't help you at all because you're not paying payroll taxes right now. So it's really galling. And I think it is going to cause some long-term problems for us. It's a moral outrage. We should all feel a moral outrage, but it is really an economic weakness too. We are not going to be able to pull ourselves out of this economic hole if you've got 11 million people still without a job. If you've got Black and brown communities who are being absolutely hammered by the recession and the public health crisis, when you've got low and middle income people who are really struggling to put food on the table, while rich people are basically like their income and their wealth is just skyrocketing.
Yeah, they've never had it so good.
For a strong economy.
No, they've never had it so good. The tax rates have not been lower and since the end of the Reagan era. But this is one of those moments where we see the story coming out of Florida that Roy DeSantis, is the governor there, is going to lift the moratorium on evictions and foreclosures. I see that happening across the country, and the last, as I said at the beginning, the last report that I saw is some 23 million people as of August are at risk of being thrown out of their homes, and yet last night the big debate didn't bring us any closer to a solution, didn't bring us any policy that we can hope for or push for. It brought us chaos.
It was incredibly disappointing and scary, honestly. I mean, I give credit to Vice President Biden. I don't know what he could have done. I even give a little credit to Wallace. I think he tried. He really tried to bring some order there. But like you said, President Trump came in with a plan to just sow chaos and confusion, and he did it. And the thing that really just absolutely stuck out to me, maybe more than anything, well, not more than anything else, when he refused to condemn white supremacy, that was pretty galling. But right after that, Vice President Biden was talking directly to the American people about the 200,000 Americans who have lost their lives, and President Trump could not help but make it about himself. And that to me is just a perfect encapsulation of his entire presidency. Major problems, major disparities, major harm, and instead of trying to do anything about it, he makes it about himself and what a hard time he's had and what a great job he's done. And I don't know how people could have come away from that debate thinking, oh yeah, this guy should definitely get 4 more years of the White House. I'm sure some people did, but it's hard for me to understand that.
Yeah, I struggle with that level of narcissism, that it's really all about him. And it's one of the things that I think the Trump supporters actually like about him. Because I know people who thought the debate was a solid victory for Trump, that he went in and he showed Joe Biden and he showed the world that he's a tough guy. And I'm going, but how is that going to make our lives any better? How is that going to keep people in their homes? How is that going to create good jobs? How's it going to make sure that people don't have to worry about going broke if they get sick? How is it going to fix our infrastructure? I mean, we can go down the list of the numerous problems our nation faces. How is the bully beating up on Joe Biden going to make any of that better?
Nothing. It isn't. And what's interesting? You just ran through this list of really big problems that we have to solve, and it reminded me that 4 years ago, I mean, Trump was still a bully, and he was in my view, a disaster of a candidate even 4 years ago. But at that point, he was saying things like, "Let's do an infrastructure bill. I'm gonna cut taxes for the middle class," and he said things like, "I'm gonna pay so much more in taxes under my plan," which maybe we can talk about that. But he didn't even pretend. There was no pretending in this debate that he had any plans at all to make people's lives better, easier, improve their prospects. He did not name a single one. He talked about all the judges he did, and he called Joe Biden stupid, and he insulted Joe Biden's family, and he argued with Chris Wallace. Like, way to go, buddy.
And check. That's exactly what he wanted to do. But you brought up the tax situation, because he said during the debate that if his exact words, that he's paid millions of dollars in federal income tax. Now, judging from what we saw from the New York Times report, what was it, 15 and 16, he paid $750 a year.
Yeah, 16, 17, I think.
Okay,
yeah.
16 and 17, he paid $750 a year. That's not millions and millions. Maybe my zeros are wrong. So I'm curious, how is it that his tax plan would, I guess the way I'm looking at it is he didn't lie about his tax plan making him pay more, because he was only paying $750.
I'm pretty sure he's not paying any more. There's nothing in his tax law that he wrote and signed really would have affected any of the shenanigans that he used to lower his tax bill to basically zero, and in many cases zero. What's really galling and is, here's a guy who knew that he was paying almost basically nothing in taxes, had an opportunity to rewrite the tax code, and did not close those loopholes, but instead gave corporate his corporate friends a huge tax cut and gave a tax cut to the kind of income that he was making. That's that business income, which he often called small business. But I mean, Trump is a good example that that's not really small business. So he had the chance, if he really meant it, to make some changes in the tax code that would have meant people like him would have paid more. But he didn't do that. He didn't do that. And I would just say this, to the idea that I mean, I'm sure he was just lying, because it's impossible to trust anything he says. But if he really believes that he paid millions in federal income taxes in 2017, he could prove it. Yeah. He could prove it very easily. He doesn't even have to release his whole tax returns. He could just release one page of his 1040 and it would show exactly how much he paid. But he's not going to do that, because it's going to show $750.
What I find interesting is, it's one of those moments where you go, there is a tweet for everything. I had a listener send me a tweet that he had put out. I guess it was back in 2012, April of 2012, that Obama only paid 20.5% tax on his $790,000 in income. And I'm going, 20.5%. That's a lot compared to $750.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I mean, there's so much in that one tweet. Like 20% effective income tax rate is actually just about what the average effective federal income tax rate is for people in the top bracket. Now, you might think that's too low. I kind of think it is too low.
I do.
But that is, like, Obama was paying exactly what you would have expected by somebody who followed the law and paid exactly what he owed. And it's about 20%. People sometimes, they hear the top marginal rate and they think, those people are paying 38, 35, whatever the rate is percent. They're not. They're only paying that on the last dollars that they earn. They're paying the same low rates that everybody else is paying on their money up until then. And most rich people, as Donald Trump has shown, have lots of ways to get that tax bill down even further.
And I go through this every time I talk about the Eisenhower tax code, because in 1953, the top marginal rate, that last dollar that you're talking about, was taxed at 92%.
That's right.
And, you go, who would pay 92%? I'm going, they didn't actually pay 92% on all of their money. It was every bracket up, you paid that rate.
That's right. And people always, whenever I'm sure this happens whenever you bring this up with some of your conservative friends, they'll always say, yeah, but nobody was paying that rate. Or, it wasn't really that high. But the point was that nobody was paying that rate. The point was that it was a way to make sure that money did not pool with just the rich. Yep. And it would actually flow into the economy and produce more growth and more jobs. So yeah, rates that high are actually pretty good for the economy. They help to make sure that things are moving and growing and not just sitting in a bank account of some billionaire, which is what we have now.
Well, what we did is we built a major infrastructure. And we paid for our wars. And, who could be angry about that? But, Michael, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Sounds good. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much. Our good friend Michael Linden. He's the executive director of the Groundwork Collaborative. Make sure you check out their website, groundworkcollaborative.org. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1892. That was the day that 29 leaders of the Homestead Steel Strike in Pennsylvania were charged with treason against the state. If you're a regular listener to Labor History in 2, you've heard about this strike before. The strike occurred because the steel company decided to reduce wages and crush the emerging union. When the workers refused to accept a pay cut, company manager Henry Clay Frick laid off the entire workforce. He hired Pinkerton guards to protect the strikebreakers. But the workers of Homestead were not so easily put out of the plant. They fought back against the Pinkertons. 9 workers were killed, as were 7 Pinkertons. Many more were injured on both sides. Strike leaders stood trial for murder. The jury found them innocent. But 29 strike leaders were arrested again. This time, they were charged with treason. During the trial, the Chief Justice Justice of Pennsylvania instructed the grand jury, when a large number of men arm and organize themselves by divisions and companies, appoint officers, and engage in a common purpose to defy the law, to resist its officers, and to deprive any portion of their fellow citizens of the rights to which they are entitled, it is a levying of war against the state, and the offense is treason. Despite this charge to the grand jury, the jury again refused to convict these strike leaders. However, paying legal fees and bail drained the strike finances. While leaders were kept in jail, the morale of the strike was broken. The Homestead steel mills were not unionized until well into the 20th century. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Suddenly, social distancing is our new national etiquette, abruptly supplanting handshakes, hugs, gatherings, and other forms of ingrained communal behavior by us humans. Awkward, disconcerting, isolating. Yet, as we frantically scramble to deter the health and economic ravages of COVID-19, we might benefit by pondering a self-inflicted cause of a contagion's disastrous spread: social distancing. For some 40 years, American corporations and governments have imposed economic, political, and social policies to distance the financial fortunes of the wealthy few from the well-being of the workaday majority. Consider the interrelationship of multimillionaires with the unseen kitchen staff of restaurants where they dine. To further enrich themselves, such multimillionaires have forced low-wage policies on food preparers, denied health coverage for them, and lobbied to kill proposals to provide paid sick leave. So, a kitchen worker coughs because he or she is infected with coronavirus, but doesn't know it, since the worker has no health care coverage for testing. Even though running a fever, the staffer must come to work or lose the job. A few days later, a multimillionaire sneezes because, well, COVID-19 doesn't distinguish between rich and poor. The very proposals that plutocrats have been blocking for years, like living wages, Medicare for all, home health care, and others, are exactly what a sane government would adopt to avoid the consequences of inequality that now confronts every American. This is Jim Hightower saying, the actual disease that's forcing social distancing on our country is the widening separation of rich elites from the rest of us, and the cure is a national push for renewed social cohesiveness. The catastrophic spread of COVID-19 reveals a truth we too often deny. We are a species of completely interdependent beings.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a big loss for the Trump campaign, folks, in Montana, of all places, where a federal judge ruled that Trump's claims of widespread fraud claimed it was a fiction. And it's one of those things that, I'm hoping that more judges go, no, there's not widespread fraud. We need to make sure that we hold things in check. We need to make sure that the Trumpkins don't double vote, because I'm expecting that. But it's not what Trump's been saying. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, the state of our voting system and maybe what we can expect on election night. I've asked our good friend Greg Palast to come and talk with us. Greg's an investigative journalist, also the author of numerous incredible books, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, Armed Madhouse, and of course the most recent Palast book is the author of How Trump Stole 2020. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
You're very welcome, Rick.
So what do you think of this story coming out of Montana, that the federal judge said, this claim that it's widespread voter fraud is a fiction? I'm curious your thought.
Well, fairy tales may come true. They could happen to you. Didn't the philosopher Frank Sinatra say that?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a fairy tale. But in fact, in How Trump Stole 2020, I did a calculation based on the work of Lorraine Minetti, who is Professor Minetti's the top expert in vote fraud. It's kind of a crappy job because there's hardly anyone who commits vote fraud. So spend a lot of time sitting on your hands. I calculated that you are 27% more likely to die from a lightning strike than cast a fraudulent mail-in ballot. 500% more likely to get hit and killed by a lightning strike. It doesn't happen because you know what? You jerk around with a ballot and you go to jail for 5 years. And by the way, I've never yet seen someone skip hard time. It's a federal and a state offense in every state.
Right.
So it's a joke and it doesn't happen. However, here's what's not a joke and what no one is discussing, Rick, and it's killing me. And it's going to kill Biden, which is while voters don't commit fraud with mail-in ballots, fraud is committed upon the voters. That is, voters' ballots are challenged when they're mailed in all over the place. I just heard a Democratic elections officials in Pennsylvania, Hispanic, who also has a radio show in Spanish, who said, look, he's telling all his people, I work in elections. Mail-in ballots are challenged all the time. You see those Boogaloo boys, the Proud Boys, everyone's worried about the violence that they're going to commit against the lines. They're going to try to intimidate voters. No. Trump actually told them what to do. He says, I want you to be poll watchers. And he said, I want these people inside the polls where they can then challenge votes. That's the danger. So I'm very worried about fraud being committed on mail-in ballots, not being committed by the
Right.
vote.
And this is where I struggle. And the reason I brought this particular story up is I struggle with being the defender of our electoral system and saying, no, there's no fraud. It's everything's going to be okay. Because I don't believe that. I don't believe the mail-in ballot is the best way to go. I'm going to show up in person and cast my ballot. But and I'm not saying everyone has to do that. But I'm worried about all of the shenanigans, and you're right. There'll be people, poll watchers in, and tons of lawyers to challenge every single. There's no envelope, or they put the ballot in backwards. I'm waiting for all of that craziness.
Well, in fact, let me give you some numbers. In 2016, when we didn't have a big mail-in election, though about 30% of people do mail in their votes, even before this time, we had over 100,000 ballots lost to postage due. We had 141,000 ballots challenged and rejected because someone said the signature was no good. The signature, this was not the voter's signature. Now understand, think about that. They're actually saying 141,000 people committed forgery. Now, they didn't arrest anyone. If there's all these forgers, you couldn't find out of 141,000 one? Not one. Not one, but yet all those votes were challenged. Who challenges the vote? Well, I hate to say it, both parties have been involved in this game, but the Republicans are much better, especially in general elections. And so I'm very concerned. And by the way, we have a third choice, which I really emphasize. There's mailing in your ballot. There's actually 4 choices. Mailing in your ballot, which, I'm telling you, don't go postal if you don't have to. Look, I'm an old dude with a bad heart. I can't be going there on election day, but I'm taking the other choice. Vote early. Almost every state has an early voting option. And I can tell you from experience, if you go midweek, stop thinking of election day. This is election month we're about to head into. In the election month, most states have early voting. You go midweek during the day, in the afternoon, evening. I'm telling you, I was at a gigantic voting center here in California, UCLA. It's for like 200,000 people. It's huge. And in 2 hours, 2 people showed up to vote. And then on election day, the lines were out a half a mile. Now you'd say, people, you don't have to wait for election day. It's election month. Please vote early. You don't have to wait in line. You don't have to, get coughed on by some guy who refuses to wear a mask and is wearing a MAGA hat. You don't have to, please get in that vote early. And, I'm very, very concerned that people do not grab this terrific option. In some states, early voting is more restrictive than others. And on Souls to the Polls Sunday, when African Americans traditionally have been voting in America, when I say traditionally, the last 20 years, those days are crowded. The Sunday, if you're early voting on the Sunday before the Tuesday, they make it crowded because they don't want African Americans to vote in places like Ohio, where I stood in line for 5 hours in Dayton. That was in 16 on Souls to the Polls Day. I then went to, by the way, the Toledo white suburbs and to see how long the line was. Was it 5 hours or was it, an hour or what? Zero line.
Yeah.
Zero line in the white suburbs. So, look, vote early if you can. If you have to vote on election day, if you have to, mail in your ballot. But if you mail in your ballot, for God's sake, be careful. If it says sign exactly as you register and you don't know how you registered, register again. I'm not kidding you. You can register as many times as you want. Not vote as many times as you want, but you can register as many times as you want. So be careful. My mother, a union leader, had lost her ballot because she didn't fill in the bubbles correctly. And my sister, who's a lawyer, lost her mail-in ballot because, again, she mismarked the ballot. Really easy to do. So if you have to mail in, have someone check it over. And if you're in states like Wisconsin, Alabama, Minnesota, you better get your witness signature. Don't forget it.
Yeah, because they're gonna toss it out. Since you brought up Wisconsin, I did want to get your thoughts because it's there's a list evidently that's in front of the state Supreme Court there in Wisconsin that could remove upwards of 129,000 voters from the rolls, claiming that they changed addresses. Tell me about that.
Yeah, there's a right-wing group called Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Now, I like law and I like liberty, but who are these guys? Well, they're backed by right-wing billionaire Bradley family. So you got these billionaires who are saying, oh, well, there's too many people on the voter rolls. We don't want them to vote. 129,000 people. They've sued to force the state election board to remove these people. Now, as you know, Rick, I've been fighting. I'm in a toe-to-toe, grenade-to-grenade battle with the Secretary of State of Georgia, who insists on his Jim Crow methods for fixing this election. But in Wisconsin, the Board of Elections, which is bipartisan, looked at this right-wing hit list and said, we think this list is junk, that these people that they say moved didn't move, so we don't want to use this list. This list could be 10% wrong. Then they met with me and I said, look, I actually have experts that can tell you if people moved. You know, it's the experts, Amazon, eBay, Home Depot. Their experts worked with me, went through that list of 129,000. It originally started out as 153,000 names. We went through name by name by name, and I did one other thing, which the law requires, and these schmoes didn't do, which is that you have to go to the post office and ask the post office to go through the list. That's in federal law. And you can't just use these cheapo free stuff off the web. You have to hire the post office through its licensee, a big corporation called Merkle, which we did. And lo and behold, we found 39,722. We're not guessing, we're not sampling, exactly 39,722 people that they were going to remove as movers who never moved. We called 700 of them just to make sure. It included, by the way, among their movers, they said moved out of Milwaukee. You can move, but if you move out of your city, you can't vote there, right? So they had Sequana Taylor on the list of people to remove. And I said to her, why are you voting in Milwaukee if you've left Milwaukee? And she said, in her defense, I didn't leave Milwaukee. I'm a Milwaukee County supervisor. I don't think she left Milwaukee. And, it's funny, but the truth is that she was certainly guilty of attempting to vote while black. And that's the list. It's not a list of people who've moved. It's a list of people who are low income and African American or students out of Madison. Almost the entire list. And in fact, if you go to gregpalace.com, you'll see my report, you'll see maps. There's a map of the people that they were going to remove in Wisconsin and Milwaukee, and a map of African Americans in Milwaukee, and they're like an exact match. So it wasn't a list of movers, it was a list of voters of color. And then you go to Madison, it's all students. So look, Trump supposedly won Wisconsin by 21,000 votes, 22,000 votes. You remove 120,000. Hey, black voters and students, excuse me, that's a big fat thumb on the scale, Rick. Yeah. That's the game they're doing. So I presented that material to the Board of Elections saying, you guys are more right than you know. It's not 10% wrong. This thing is like 63% wrong. It's just a Jim Crow list.
Yeah, but
and we gave it to the Attorney General and the courts. And I think, I hope that the truth will set our voters free.
Yeah, but this is one of those moments. This is one of those moments where you listen to Donald Trump in the debate, and I don't know if you watched that train wreck. But he keeps hammering on it's all fraudulent. It's going to be stolen from me. He's setting up. I think he knows he's going to lose, and he's setting up the argument for setting aside the election. I think. I'm curious your thought.
Oh, I'm very worried. And by the way, don't discount what he said to the Proud Boys. Stand by, right? He said, stand back, but stand by. In other words, get ready for the signal. Now, who gives the signal? Who is the real director of the Proud Boys? His name is Roger Stone, and he was just let out of prison for this purpose. Why would you let a rattlesnake out of prison? Because you are intent on him biting someone and using his fellow snakes called the Proud Boys, and then there's the Boogaloo Boys, etc. What I'm worried about is this, Rick. I'm worried about violence. And I'm worried that this election will be decided by violence. When people say Trump won't leave, will he leave office? They think of him holding on to the sides of the Resolute desk in the Oval Office and saying, I'm not leaving. You can't take me out, copper. No. That's not how it works. Imagine this. Roger Stone led the Brooks Brothers riot back in 2000. Now, for those who don't know what that was, it was down. Gore had been called the winner in Florida by exit polls. He crushed it. He didn't just win Florida. He walked away with Florida. But then they started challenging votes. Now, people actually don't know the numbers, but 178,000 ballots were disqualified in Florida. Overwhelmingly, the number one city, people don't realize, is Jacksonville, Florida, which is one of the blacker cities in Florida, Jacksonville, where 29,000 votes were simply tossed out from African-American precincts. Now, why do I bring this up? Way back, that's 20 years ago, Palast. Well, here's why. Because the riot stopped the count of ballots, which couldn't be machine counted, in Miami-Dade clerk's office. Now, they stopped the count because it was too dangerous with Roger Stone and his berserkers banging on the windows, smashing stuff up. But it was pretty polite compared to what the Proud Boys do and what the Boogaloo Boys do and the rest of the freak show. You should see now, right now, as we speak, I have my man, Zach D. Roberts, who has been traveling around with the Proud Boys for the last 2 years, by the way. And finding out what they're up to and taking pictures of these guys where they grin with their portraits with the swastikas tattooed on their face and shoulders. And Roger Stone will say, there are 100,000 ballots from Bolivia in that post office in Tallahassee, burnt down. Forget the Gucci riot. Forget Brooks Brothers suits. These maniacs are going to go into that Miami-Dade counting office and shut that down. You're going to have Milwaukee on fire to stop the count in Wisconsin. You're going to have Detroit on fire to stop Michigan. I'm sorry, I'm giving you the dark truth that I believe is going to happen. At which point, remember, people who are mailing in their ballots are hoping that they'll be counted. And I know Joe Biden says all the votes will be counted. He's going to be a very busy man ripping open all those envelopes so fast. No, Joe cannot guarantee that your vote will be counted. And if you believe that Joe knows your vote will be counted, well, then you're not only electing him president, you're electing him fortune teller in chief, because that won't happen. The chance that every mail-in ballot will be counted is absolutely dead zero. They've never been counted. He's right. The military's been voting for over 150 years by mail and losing 1/3 of all military ballots never get counted, Joe. Okay, so it's not a good idea. And they don't get counted. And how many people know when is election day in Florida? It's not November 3rd. That's when the schmucks get in line to cast a ballot. But remember, we don't elect the president of the United States. We elect electors.
Right.
And the decision on electors, the vote on electors is made by the legislature of Florida and the Republican extreme right partisan Secretary of State of Florida, the Republican legislature. They vote on which electors are selected. And the cutoff for ballots is in Florida, November 11th. That's 8 days to count how many millions of mail-in ballots in Florida. We don't know. 8 million voters, figure 2, 3, 4 million. And with each one being challenged by one of the Boogaloo boys or the Proud Boys or the Republican lawyers, it's not going to be counted in 8 days. And therefore, the ballots that will be counted will be Election Day ballots, Republican ballots. They vote early, and they vote on Election Day. And they'll pick Trump, even though the ballots aren't counted. There you go. That's the dark side. Sorry. I can tell you something nice.
Do tell. There's a chance. We can fix this, right? We can beat this, right?
Yes. Okay. Listen to me. I know I look like in this dark, weird lighting. I look like I'm in the witness protection program. So let me. I don't want to make this hypnotic, but listen to me. They can't steal all the votes all the time. You know, when I was writing for Rolling Stone, my writing partner, Bobby Kennedy, was able to call Obama, something I can't generally do, and talk to him about, do you know about votes being stolen? Did you know that in 2008, Obama had 5.8 million votes stolen from him? Stolen.
Right.
He knew it. He could recite the statistics. He could tell us how it was done. It was brilliant. So it's like, well, why don't you say something about it? You know what his response is? They can't steal all the votes all the time.
Right.
If they're stealing 5.8 million, we bring 6.8 million more people to the polls, and he did it. Okay. In Wisconsin, they came up with the worst Jim Crow tactics to remove voters, to block voters, change ID laws 2 weeks before the election. Rick, and yet people came out in 2018 and threw Scott Walker's behind right out of office. Despite all the trickery, they threw his butt out of office. They can't steal all the votes all the time. So the number one, you overwhelm them. And number two, you vote smart. So if you can, like I will hand it to Biden about one thing. While he was a bit too reassuring about your mail-in vote, his first recommendation is, if you can, vote early. So let me take, I usually don't quote Joe Biden a lot, but I will have to say he's dead on right on this one. If you can, vote early in person. Now, if you can't, do the mail-in thing, but you better, if you haven't asked your ballot now, we're almost in October, that's probably too late. So you have to go into your voting office and pick it up. Oh, you're going to say, well, no, you can still ask for it. Yeah, you just won't get it.
Right.
Okay, this is a problem. 1 in 10 people don't get their ballot on time, or it never arrives at all. This is a big problem. And the other thing is, we have these purges in places like Georgia. If you've been removed from the voter rolls, and 16.7 million of you have nationwide, you ain't getting no mail-in ballot. And you know what? There's a rule in elections. If they don't mail the ballot out to you, you can't mail it back in. I mean, it's simple. It's physics, guys. If you don't get the ballot mailed to you, you can't mail it back in. So you better make that, if you're going to do that request, you do it right now. But I plan on early voting. Each state is different in our crazy American system. Look it up online. And if you're in Wisconsin, if you're in Georgia, if you're in North Carolina, if you're in Ohio or some other states, you go to gregpalast.com and you can see if you're on one of the purge lists.
And that's important to do. I make sure I check mine quite often, make sure I haven't been thrown off, because you got me paranoid about it. So good stuff. If you can vote early. If you can vote in person, do that. Like here in Pennsylvania, you can take your ballot right to a drop-off site and drop it off yourself. Do that. But if you're like me, I'm gonna put on my hazmat suit with the mask and the whole 9 yards, and I'm going to the polls to cast my ballot. That's just how it is. Greg, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff. Appreciate it. I hope you'll come back and talk with us again real soon. I will. Be safe. Thanks, Rick. You as well, my friend. Good stuff. Greg Palast. Make sure you check out his website, gregpalast.com. Also the books. A lot of really great reading. Since we're still inside, make sure we get that. We'll get links out on how you can check that out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. That was the day oil workers walked off the job. The strike soon spread to 20 states and involved more than 43,000 workers at 22 oil companies. After years of wartime wage freezes, the union's demand was 52 for 40, 52 hours pay for 40 hours work. Workers demanded a 30% pay increase, shift differentials, and an eventual return to the 36-hour work week. The strike began in Michigan at the Saccone Vacuum Refinery in Trenton. From there, it spread to Gulf, Sinclair, and Shell. By October 4th, President Truman signed Executive Order 9639, allowing the Secretary of the Navy to seize petroleum operations. The Oil Workers International Union CIO immediately called off the strike and ordered its members back to work. A month later, the Navy had still not relinquished control of operations. The Union considered Truman's seizure a betrayal. There was no mechanism put in place to settle the dispute or consider workers' demands. By January 1946, the oil panel created by the Secretary of Labor finally awarded oil workers an 18% wage increase. Though disappointed, the Union considered it a victory. They asserted the strike action was significant on a number of levels. The first nationwide industry strike had just forced the oil companies to meet with the union for the very first time. The OWI believed the groundwork for industry-wide bargaining had been finally established. It had been the first post-war strike and had forced the government to begin moving away from wartime wage controls. Of the post-war strikes, it won the largest pay increase. And importantly, it broke the power of Standard Oil to dictate wages to the industry through its dealings with its independent union.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So like I said there with Greg, one of the things that is concerning to me, and we went through this in 2016, and I was really uncomfortable with it then as well, is defending our electoral system. For me, I'm of the mindset that we need to figure out a way that we can vote in person on a hand ballot, on a piece of paper with a marker and a piece of paper where this is who I want. There's no question who it is. You put a big X through their name. That's who I want. Or you circle it or whatever. You come up with a dab, whatever. But there's got to be your mark on that ballot, and it's right there. Because here's my problem. We are now seeing this story coming out of Philadelphia that, I'll tell you, is really disconcerting in the fact that it's possible that in Philly anyway, they've gotten a hold of the memory sticks that are used to program the voting machines there in Philadelphia. And now the questions have become, now that they've got all these memory sticks, could the election be compromised? What could happen, between now and then? What happens if they magically show up? Do you use them? There's just so many things, and I'd watched this series about James Comey, and in fact tomorrow we'll have the writer and director Billy Ray on to talk about the Showtime series. But it's one of these things that as I'm watching through this series. I'm thinking about, all of this insanity that went on in 16. And, the talk of Trump back then of, they're going to steal the election from me. It's all rigged. The electoral system is broken, all that stuff. And look, I've been talking to a lot of Trump supporters who they've internalized it. They've said, I don't care. I'm going to the polls and I'm casting my ballot because everything else is a fraud. So, this is where I think, Palast has got the right idea. And it scares me, especially about Florida. We're being told, mail in your ballot, be safe, do that. And I'm there. Be safe, do what you've got to do. Trump supporters are seeing this as this is my call to duty. This is my moment to stand and defend, our democracy. We're going to show up, even if the virus is raging. We're going to the polls, and he knows this. A lot of people are like, well, don't you think his supporters, the old people, they're going to worry about being sick, and they may. But if Palast is right, and look, sadly, Greg's been right all the time. Greg's one of those guys, and the reason I have him on often is because he's usually right. There are a number of people who, say, things you go, wow, that's really out there. And they're usually right. It might not come down to all of the ballots. It may come down to, especially in Florida, when they can stop the counting. And if the fix is already in, and that's where, we've all heard the Obama statement. If they're going to steal 5 million, we got to get 7. We've all heard that. That's why you've got to get friends, family, neighbors, everybody out to vote. And if you're going to do the mail-in ballot, the early ballot, maybe go hand deliver it to the Elections Bureau. Maybe go and put it into the box at the Elections Bureau. I understand there's places around the state where you can put this in. You can find that on the website. Call your local elections office. But make sure it's done right. Now, as I said, for me, I'm going to the polls. I'm going to push the button. I'm going to cast my ballot. Because this election, more than any other, election night is too important. Because whoever can come out of election night saying that they won is going to be the position that our mainstream media kind of pushes forward. It's about that night. And look, everyone's setting us up for knowing that we're not going to know who won. Because there are so many votes still in the queue. They're here in Pennsylvania, they've got 2 days until after, as long as it's postmarked the day of, for them to be counted. It's that first night. So for me, get those ballots in early. And if you can, get the hazmat suit if you have to, with the self-breathing apparatus, go in with the oxygen tank, with the scuba tank if you have to, but cast your ballot. That's simple. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What are you planning to do this voting cycle? Are you planning to vote? I hope so. And if you are, what's the plan? Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Experts say that diseases associated with this amoeba have a 97% mortality rate.
Texas town's water system shut down due to deadly brain-eating amoeba.
The Tongass National Forest in Alaska has been called America's Amazon.
Trump administration opens up nation's largest protected forest to logging.
Sullivan's a Republican senator, and is it important that he gets elected?
Pebble Mine CEO resigns after boasting about obedient Alaskan politicians. Plus,
she is going to strip our federal laws of all environmental and labor regulations.
Trump's nominee to replace Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is not an advocate of the environment or public health.
Who could have guessed it? All of that and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Do your children debate you? Do they debate you?
Debate me. They troll me. My one son has a sign on his door that says zero emissions 2030 or do not enter.
Congresswoman Katie Porter's son for president. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you got a boatload of news here today, so don't mind me. I'll try to shut up.
Okay. Well, first, in southeast Texas, Governor Greg Abbott has issued a disaster declaration for the town of Lake Jackson in Brazoria County, where all 27,000 residents are under a boil water notice after a brain-eating amoeba discovered in the drinking water supply killed a 6-year-old boy. An investigation is underway to find out how the deadly amoeba, Naegleria fowleri, which is found in warm, fresh water and soil, got into the municipal water system.
Wow, 27,000 people affected by this.
Yes.
Not good.
In California, as we go to air, another round of record-breaking heat and high winds is driving another explosion of new wildfires, destroying homes and forcing thousands to evacuate during a pandemic. Several wineries have been destroyed or damaged in wine country in a new fire that broke out on Sunday in areas that had previously escaped the catastrophic fires of 2017 and 2018. 25 25 large wildfires are currently burning in California. Dozens more are burning from Texas to Washington. Also, while nearly 40 people have been directly killed by fires in California, new research estimates that the actual death toll is likely much higher due to wildfire smoke. Researchers say new mortality data indicates the dense concentrations of smoke since August have contributed to around 1,200 excess deaths and nearly 5,000 emergency room visits that would not otherwise have occurred.
And we're about to have another heat wave over the next 3 or 4 days.
Yep. In Alaska, the U.S. CEO of the proposed controversial Pebble Mine has resigned a day after being caught on tape boasting of his control over Alaska politicians. Tom Collier, who stood to gain a $12 million bonus if the Pebble Mine is approved, resigned after recorded Zoom calls showed him boasting that Senator Lisa Murkowski would not do or say anything to damage the mine's approval. And he said this about Republican Senator Dan Sullivan, now running for re-election.
So Murkowski isn't up for election. When a senator's not up for election, they don't do anything. And Sullivan's going into his second. So he's got a battle on his hands, and we're trying to work with him to make sure he doesn't go and say something negative.
The tapes also revealed that the company is hiding the true size and scope of the mine. Their plans are for the mine to be much, much bigger and last decades longer than they outlined in their permit filings.
And no doubt present an even greater threat to the salmon fisheries up there.
Exactly. The Trump administration has moved to open up the pristine Tongass National Forest in Alaska, the nation's largest remaining intact wilderness and one of the world's largest temperate rainforests, to clear-cut logging and development. The administration moved to lift the Clinton-era protection known as the roadless rule, which protected forests for generations of Americans. Worse, the old-growth Tongass is also one of the nation's largest carbon sinks, absorbing nearly 10% of U.S. carbon dioxide emissions.
Why does he even need a second term? There will be nothing left to destroy.
Finally, Donald Trump has nominated right-wing federal judge Amy Coney Barrett for the U.S. Supreme Court seat left vacant by the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Slate legal reporter Mark Joseph Stern on the broadcast warned that all environment and climate legislation and regulations, past, present, and future, are at risk if Barrett is confirmed.
She is going to strip our federal laws of all environmental and labor regulations. She is going to abolish the federal government's ability to regulate carbon emissions, mercury, lead. She is going to remake this entire country's law in a way that might satisfy a robber baron of the 1800s, but will make everyone else feel rightly like they are living in the Dark Ages.
And the horrible thing, even if Donald Trump doesn't win a second term, he'll keep on destroying this country for a generation because of the Supreme Court. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So even after the giant chaotic show debate last night, our Senate actually did something today. Yes, 84-10. Yes, 84 senators agreed on something. 10 didn't agree. They agreed to pass the stopgap funding bill to avoid the government shutdown. They have funded our government through December 11th. So the next hostage crisis, put it on the calendar, could be December 11th. Don't think so. I think if Biden wins in January, we're going to go back to the hostage crisis stuff. But we shall see. Anyway, to share some thoughts on the debate and also some of the inner workings of our Congress. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney, former congressman and political analyst, to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So yawn vote, as you've said numerous times in the past.
Right. Yeah. Well, when Bush was president, you had a couple of yawn votes. The first big yawn vote was, raising the debt ceiling. That was the big yawn vote. You voted, you yawned, you went to dinner. When Obama became president, that became life or death. Well, we're going to raise the debt ceiling. We're going to destroy America. Now these continuation bills, they call them budgets, but they aren't. continuation bills, they become the cliff drama. And then there's the profiles in courage. They stepped up to the plate. They faced the challenge, as you can tell. I'm very sarcastic about the whole thing. They punted it a little bit down the road. This is where you can't tell a Democrat from a Republican, because they get together in a room and they kind of say, look, you're going to chest thump, I'm going to chest thump, but look, let's just get past the election, okay?
Yeah.
Then we can fight with each other.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, it's just crazy. And it's one of those things where I'm like, is this even a story anymore?
Right.
I don't know. As I've said from the beginning, the time to fight over spending is before you spent the money.
Oh, exactly.
Just the thing.
Correct.
So I got this email, and I know we've talked about this before. It's from the Freedom Caucus people, the House Freedom Fund. They are in the process of they want to have a vote to kick Nancy Pelosi out. And I know we talked about this already, but the good folks at the House Freedom Fund, they are raising money off the idea that they can somehow call for a vote of no confidence, and that's going to throw Nancy Pelosi out of her seat as Speaker.
Right, and then you have Kevin McCarthy. He's the minority leader, as you know, and he is saying, well, now wait a minute, look, we got our Freedom Caucus. They're great. They save us, quote, quote, everything. But we got to focus on winning the elections, because McCarthy's smart and he knows where, the real juice of this lays, and that's winning the House. So the Freedom Caucus makes this great, bold move. We're going to remove Nancy Pelosi, which is literally impossible to do, and not within the realm of even thinking about the probability of it. It's just like right now to resurrect the idea of impeaching Trump is, maybe that could be a fundraising letter, but, you're not going to see the mainstream leaders of the Democratic Party offer that forth. So this is a fundraising tool. They'll write the traditional letter. I'm sitting here by candlelight writing to you because this is the end of America. The electric's already off. I've not written that, but I've written similar things.
Yeah, no, I mean, and the reason I bring it up is because, I have people who believe that this stuff is possible. And I'm like, did you not pass 8th grade civics class?
Sure. That's like when, your party takes over, whatever somebody's party is, they take over the Senate, and they've got a 1-vote margin, and then all of a sudden, because of the cloture rule, which is 60 votes, people say, well, you're controlling the Senate, you should be able to do this. Well, you still need 60 votes. There's certain realities, and that's one of them, the cloture vote. This is another reality. You're not going to remove Nancy Pelosi. Another reality, Trump's not going to be impeached before the November election.
You bring up an interesting point here. I mean, this is an interesting question then, because there's still the cloture vote on certain things, right, not on judges. Let's say that the Democrats do get a 51-49 vote in the Senate. Are they then able to bypass cloture, since it's dead on judicial nominees, to expand the court, or is that something you'd have to get 60 votes for? Or do they have to chuck the cloture vote and filibuster altogether, as they've done on judicial nominees and the Supreme Court?
Well, they did it, and then they call it the nuclear option, which is just so ridiculous. The House votes, once you get to 218 votes, you've got the bill, right? But not the Senate. In its wisdom, you don't get to 51, you get to 60. And someday, somehow, maybe after an election, I don't know what, the party that goes into the minority in the Senate has to step up to the plate and say, no more cloture. Somehow, it's got to be done, because when they're in power, the party wants to do away with it, but if they're in the minority, they have to have it. And I think it's a bizarre, arcane rule that needs to be done away with.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, because no one's going to get to the 60, I think, anytime soon.
Right, exactly.
I also wanted to get your thoughts on the most recent piece of legislation moved in the House. It didn't pass, obviously. The Democrats voted down Louis Gohmert's resolution 223 to 176. But he wanted to ban the Democratic Party or any political organization because of its history of supporting slavery and the Confederacy. I find that really, really just rich with irony.
Well, it is, and of course it's Louis Gohmert, so he's always doing these thrill things. He becomes a regular Fox News guest, as you know, and for him back home in his base. He puts out a fundraising letter. And now, in Louis' case, I served with him. I think he probably actually believes in, for what it's worth, in some of the things that he does, not just shock value.
Oh, no, I believe it. I believe he believes all of it to his core. The reason I gave you the vote number is 175 other people joined with Louis to support that.
Right. And right. And it was to ban the Democratic Party because of, some past votes, which, were there. We also had past members, Republican and Democrat, who had participated in KKK activities. I've always argued the late Senator Byrd, because his name's brought up. And this is recent, by the way, and it's not. It's been brought up by some of the groups in West Virginia that everything with his name on it needs to be removed. And the guy, when he was 20-some, was in the KKK. He denounced it. He got out of it, and he went on to do a lot of good things for everybody in West Virginia.
Yeah.
So, we can look back at the history of both political parties and say, wow, but you can't ban something. I mean, I'm shocked he got the amount of votes he got. I really am.
No, I'm shocked. That's the reason I bring it up. Had it been, he got one vote, you go, well, that's just Gohmert being Gohmert. I'm sure there's a couple other cranks in there as well, but 175 other people joined with him. That's just wow.
It's weird, and this couldn't have occurred when I'll say the old days, the recent old days in the 90s. You wouldn't see a resolution like this, no matter how much people argued. You wouldn't see something like this getting those kinds of votes. You just wouldn't. I'm talking about the Gingrich Clinton days, even.
Yeah, I mean,
you wouldn't see it.
An enormous waste of time and money, and especially in a moment like this, we're still in the middle of this pandemic. You got millions of people unemployed. You got millions more people who are probably going to be kicked to the curb soon, evicted from their homes and foreclosed from their homes. And we've got infrastructure problems. We got Russia problems. We got China. We got problems, and this is what they spent time to vote on.
Well, right, and of course, all of this is getting bypassed. All the things you mentioned are getting bypassed right now due to a focus on other things. How Trump and Biden, what they did during the debate. This resolution. The fact you're going to remove Pelosi, or we're going to impeach Trump. I mean, it's the saucy, spicy headlines that grabs people's attention, and they talk about it for half a day, and then it's gone.
Right.
That's what we boiled down to. I mean, there's some big deal. You make a good point. What about the safety in the workplace? What about true wages? Things that you talk about consistently, and you've talked about for a long time. Where are those things at? Where are those debates and discussions? And people latch on to one or two things, and they roll with it till the media decides they're going to latch on to something else.
Yeah, and to be honest, none of that stuff came up last night during the so-called debate. Trump brought nothing. Trump showed how prepared he was. He wasn't prepared at all, but he stuck to his game plan. And I said from the beginning, his game plan was all about chaos, and that's what he brought.
Right, and look, Joe Biden sort of took the bait. Sort of, I'll say. He didn't take the whole thing, but he sort of took the debate. And I had some friends today, really good friends, and they said, well, Trump was far worse. Trump did what he wanted to do to begin to get Joe to where he got to last night. And because, other friends of mine said, well, he called the president, a clown. Okay, well, president did all kinds of things to him. But then again, if you look at the broad picture, personally, I think Joe Biden had a moment where no matter what was said, and he could poke some fun, don't get me wrong, but no matter what was said, he could continue to go back to, this is who I am, and that's what you're seeing tonight. And he would have scored, a lot better. I don't think that needle moved anybody last night.
No, and that's what I was going to ask you. Do you think anybody was swayed by the display that we saw last night? Because I thought there were a couple of moments where he tried. He looked into the camera and he tried to connect. But when it was over, we had a little panel, and I said, "Does anybody remember anything that they talked about other than that was just a lot of noise?"
Right. He didn't. Again, he didn't win. He didn't lose. Trump did what he did. Biden, like I said, took some of the bait, not all of it, and it ended up in chaos. I mean, I was so I've been in politics 48 years. I was watching this with friends. I literally was speechless. I literally couldn't believe I turned on a presidential debate. Seriously. And I know Trump was worse, but I'm just saying at the end of the day, I couldn't believe this is what it degenerated into. My gut, Rick, last night while I'm watching this was, if Chris Wallace was halfway worth anything, he would have stopped the debate, said, gentlemen, I'm going to take a 5-minute recess, and I want you to think about what you're really doing here. And, cut off the mics and go talk to them. I know it would be weird to do that,
Yeah.
but it was so off the rails that it was nauseating.
No, it was bad, but he didn't have the ability to. How would he have cut off the mics? They didn't have that technology there.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying, in a perfect world,
Right.
I would have loved to watch him say, everybody in the country and the world, I'm going to stop this for 5 minutes. Gentlemen, I'd like to have a conversation with you, and just take them backstage.
No.
I know you can't do that. Or be the mom and take a flip-flop to them,
To the corners, each of you, and don't come out until you can behave.
There you go.
I mean, but you're right. I mean, it's one of those things where you just kind of look at it, and you got to think globally. The rest of the world is looking and going, "Wow, this country is really in chaos," and that's not a good place to be in. When we have people around the world, we're told, who hate us, and everyone's trying to eat our lunch. This kind of outward display of chaos, I don't know, is a good thing.
Well, it's not. And for those who like us, I have a lot of friends overseas in a lot of countries I've made over the years. And for the ones that like us, they might say, oh, your system's tough at times, but they like us. I got a couple of, emails and messengers from friends who are like, they said, this is a sad day for us watching this. And these are sincere people that, really think that this, has the beacon somewhere still in it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Lady Liberty had her hands over her eyes last night.
Do you think Nancy Pelosi's right? There should be no more debates?
Well, here's the problem with that. And I think they've got to be very, very careful. If there are no more debates, then, Trump will ride that for the next few weeks of, obviously Joe's afraid. He got through part of it, but we all know he has dementia. I mean, it will be on, and Trump will make that about the debates. I will say, though, I mean, as much as it may be painful, I would sit down with Joe Biden and say, look, you've been around a long time. I understand that, and you're not a carpet, and you don't want walked on. I understand that. A little bit of humor is okay, but you need, no matter what he does, no matter what the president says about your family, no matter what the president raises, you need to keep looking at that camera and tell him, look at me, here's where I'm at, and look at the alternative, no matter what he does. I know that's hard. That's tough. That's like somebody constantly pushing you, and you're not hitting them back like you want to.
So you didn't think the oh, shut up, man, and the he's Putin's puppy. You didn't think those were good things?
No, and I think the clown thing. See, here's where my friends, which I have great friends both sides of the aisle, my friends come back and say, well, the way Trump acted, he deserved to call him a clown. My point is this. Technically, they're correct, right? They are. If this was some kind of debate out in a sand lot, they'd be slugging each other. But I know they're correct, but you can't do that. And I don't think it hurt Biden. I don't think it helped him, though.
Right.
I think for those who are truly undecided, maybe the 8% of this country, and for those, by the way, who might be sick of Trump, but, they're not that sick yet, then the alternative's not there. And both of them found it incomprehensible, unable to clearly denounce certain things. I don't know what they're afraid of, but they did.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Trump couldn't denounce the white supremacists, and it looked like Biden couldn't denounce the Black Lives Matter people.
Right, or come clear on on Antifa and where he stands, and there's some easy answers to this. No one should be for white supremacy, and no one should be for any group that does violence. But that doesn't mean those groups all do violence, if that makes sense. That's the way he could have said it, Biden, and that clears it up once and for all. But they both hedged on, a few things like that, of course.
Yeah. See, for me, the question of not having any more debates is just unthinkable. I'm of the mindset, if someone were to ask me that question, I'm like, what's wrong with you? Are you crazy? I'll debate Trump on this stage, in the alley, around the corner, wherever, whenever. We're gonna save this country, and if we have to go through him to do it, we're gonna do that. But that could just be my working class bluster.
No, you're right. Look, I had a debate where my opponent attacked my mother. I kept going unfairly for no reason, really, but I kept going with the debates. Now I wanted to, say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? Once we're out in the alley, but because that's my, where I'm from, my blue collar nature down there, but in the Ohio Valley. But the point remains, you still do the debates. I mean, people have run against insane candidates, but you still do the debates, and there's no way out of this. He has to do 2 more debates now. To try to do more, obviously, they're going to tell Trump no.
Yeah, but the next one I think is going to be to Trump's detriment. It's a town hall style, so they're going to have to actually not be, because if you notice, Trump never looked at the camera. He was always focused on Biden or on Wallace. He never tried to connect. Trump clearly went into this as I'm taking Biden out.
Right. I'm curious to ask you something, if I could, real quick. Do you think they should have the ability to cut the other person's mic off when they're speaking out of turn?
I don't.
I'm just curious.
I'm not comfortable with that.
Interesting.
Now I did say a shock collar.
No. Right. That would be interesting.
I did say that there should be like a little shock collar, like a little volt. But I'm uncomfortable with someone having the arbitrary ability to turn on and off their microphones. I think they should be able to. I really think they should be able to conduct themselves in a way that allows the other person to continue to complete a thought. And that was Trump's plan from the beginning. It's, as you know, it is right-wing talk radio, what you saw during that debate. Biden started it into a sentence. Trump immediately interrupted him so he couldn't complete his thought, and then directed him in a different direction and kept hammering him and badgering him to answer a question so that he never got back to the original thought. And Biden fell for it.
And he poked him where it hurts, sensitive to his family. Yep. Joe's had great losses in his life, and he's very into his family. But the real debate came afterwards. This is where the consultants got together, made their money. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. This is where, they got out there. That's where both sides, that was the real debate after the debate last night.
No, I mean, each side's influencers, they did their lifting. And sadly, as we've talked about before, it's that I don't think it's 8% of the population's undecided. I think it's much, much smaller than that. But it's the fight to get those undecideds.
Well, sure, because I still argue it's going to be close. The uncertainty of the votes, Trump's put doubt in people's minds. Then there is the post office. Everybody get your vote in early. That's all I can say. If the postal service is slow, but that's all thrown out there, and it's all chaos. And when you turn something into chaos, you turn people off sometimes from voting. You don't turn your own people off. You tend to turn other people off. Yeah. And maybe that's the goal.
We'll see. I'm curious your thoughts. Last night, Biden said, Trump said that, Biden said that it was xenophobia to close the border with China. Biden actually never said that. But now we find this story that the Trump administration has overruled the CDC on extending the ban on cruises and cruise ships. This seems like a really dumb idea, especially in the middle of an election cycle.
Yeah, well, it's catering to the power of a lobby group, is what it's doing. I mean, Trump has his point of acting to stop, the flights from China, which, by the way, people did come from other countries, though, from China to other countries here. So let's, make that clear. He had some points there. And I think at first, some people started to say, well, you can't do this with China. And then they realized, wait a minute, this thing's bigger. Because after that, of course, there were no bright spots with Trump. Nope. That was probably the one bright spot. And then they continued to have other countries come in, and the cruise ships, they're trying to undo that. So it's just a hodgepodge of everything right now on coronavirus. It's all over the place.
A lot of chaos. Bob, as always, I appreciate the time, my friend. Always good talking with you.
You too.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Make sure you check out the work that he does. One of my favorite political commentators. And look, we're in this moment of chaos. I mean, this is what Trump has brought us. And one of the questions I think you have to ask when you go to the polls, or when you cast your ballot, is can you take 4 more years of this? as a country, can we do 4 more years of this chaos, of this uncertainty, of all of this? I saw an interesting sign. I just want it to stop. Just make it stop. And my concern is that those people fall out and they don't vote. If you're one of those people who just want it to stop, you got to vote either before November 3rd or on November 3rd. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show.